Chapter 21. Little Emily. There was a servant in that house, a man who, I understood, was usually with Steerforth, and had come into his service at the university, who was in appearance a pattern of respectability. I believe there never existed in his station a more respectable-looking man. He was taciturn, soft-footed, very quiet in his manner, deferential, observant, always at hand when wanted, and never near when not wanted. But his great claim to consideration was his respectability. He had not a pliant face, he had rather a stiff neck, rather a tight, smooth head, with short hair clinging to it at the sides, a soft way of speaking, with a peculiar habit of whispering the letter S so distinctly that he seemed to use it oftener than any other man. But every peculiarity that he had, he made respectable. If his nose had been upside down, he with an atmosphere of respectability, and walked secure in it. It would have been next to impossible to suspect him of anything wrong. He was so thoroughly respectable. Nobody could have thought of putting him in a livery. He was so highly respectable. To have imposed any derogatory work upon him would have been to inflict a wanton insult on the feelings of a most respectable man. And of this I noticed the women servants in the household were so intuitively conscious that they always did such work themselves, and generally while he read the paper by the pantry fire. Such a self-contained man I never saw, but in that quality, as in every other he possessed, he only seemed to be the more respectable. Even the fact that no one knew his Christian name seemed to form a part of his respectability. Nothing could be objected against his surname, Littimer, by which he was known. Peter might have hanged, or Tom transported, but Littimer was perfectly respectable. It was occasioned, I suppose, by the reverend nature of respectability in the abstract, but I felt particularly young in this man's presence. How old he was himself I could not guess, and that again went to his credit on the same score, for in the calmness of respectability he might have numbered 50 years as well as 30. Littimer was in my room in the morning before I was up, to bring me that reproachful shaving water and to put out my clothes. When I undrew the curtains and looked out the bed, I saw him in an equable temperature of respectability, unaffected by the east wind of January, and not even breathing frostily, standing my boots right and left in the first dancing position, and blowing specks of dust off my coat as he laid it down like a baby. I gave him good morning, and asked him what o'clock it was. He took out of his pocket the most respectable hunting watch I ever saw, and preventing the spring with his thumb from opening far, looked in at the face as if he were consulting an oracular oyster, shut it up again, and said, if I pleased, it was 8:30. Mr. Steerforth will be glad to hear how you have rested, sir. Thank you, said I. Very well indeed. Is Mr. Steerforth quite well? Thank you, sir. Mr. Steerforth is tolerably well. Another of his characteristics, no use of superlatives, a cool, calm medium, always. Is there anything more I can have the honour of doing for you, sir? The warning bell will ring at 9. The family take breakfast at 9:30. Nothing. I thank you. I thank you, sir, if you please. And with that, and with a little inclination of his head when he passed the bedside as an apology for correcting me, he went out, shutting the door as delicately as if I had just fallen into a sweet sleep on which my life depended. Every morning we held exactly this conversation, never any more and never any less, and yet, invariably, However far I might have been lifted out of myself overnight and advanced towards maturer years by Steerforth's companionship, or Mrs. Steerforth's confidence, or Miss Dartle's conversation, in the presence of this most respectable man, I became, as our smaller poets sing, a boy again. He has got horses for us, and Steerforth, who knew everything, gave me lessons in riding. He provided foils for us, and Steerforth gave me lessons in fencing, gloves, and I began, of the same master, to improve in boxing. It gave me no manner of concern that Steerforth could find me a novice in these sciences, but I never could bear to show my want of skill before the respectable Littimer. I had no reason to believe that Littimer understood such arts himself. He never led me to suppose anything of the kind, by so much as the vibration of one of his respectable eyelashes. Yet, whenever he was by, while we were practising, I felt myself the greenest and most inexperienced of mortals. I am particular about this man, because he made a particular effect on me at that time, and because of what took place thereafter. The week passed away in a most delightful manner. It passed rapidly, as may be supposed, to one entranced as I was, and yet it gave me so many occasions for knowing Steerforth better, and admiring him more in 1,000 respects, that at its close I seemed to have been with him for a much longer time. A dashing way he had of treating me like a plaything was more agreeable to me than any behaviour he could have adopted. It reminded me of our old acquaintance. It seemed the natural sequel of it. It showed me that he was unchanged. It relieved me of any uneasiness I might have felt in comparing my merits with his, and measuring my claims upon his friendship by any equal standard. Above all, it was a familiar, unrestrained, affectionate demeanour that he used towards no one else. As he had treated me at school differently from all the rest, I joyfully believed that he treated me in life unlike any other friend he had. I believed that I was nearer to his heart than any other friend, and my own heart warmed with attachment to him. He made up his mind to go with me into the country, and the day arrived for our departure. He had been doubtful at first whether to take Littimer or not, but decided to leave him at home. The respectable creature, satisfied with his lot, whatever it was, arranged our portmanteaus on the little carriage that was to take us into London, as if they were intended to defy the shocks of ages, and received my modestly proffered donation with perfect tranquillity. We bade adieu to Mrs. Steerforth and Miss Dartle, with many thanks on my part, and much kindness on the devoted mother's. The last thing I saw was Littimer's unruffled eye, fraught, as I fancied, with the silent conviction that I was very young indeed. What I felt in returning so auspiciously to the old familiar places I shall not endeavour to describe. We went down by the mail. I was so concerned, I recollect, even for the honour of Yarmouth, that when Steerforth said, as we drove through its dark streets to the inn, that, as well as he could make out, it was a good, queer, out-of-the-way kind of hole, I was highly pleased. We went to bed on our arrival. I observed a pair of dirty shoes and gaiters in connection with my old friend the Dolphin as we passed that door, and breakfasted late in the morning. Steerforth, who was in great spirits, had been strolling about the beach before I was up, and had made acquaintance, he said, with half the boatmen in the place. Moreover, he had seen, in the distance, what he was sure must be the identical house of Mr. Peggotty, with smoke coming out of the chimney, and had had a great mind, he told me, to walk in and swear he was myself grown out of knowledge. "When do you propose to introduce me there, Daisy?" he said. "I am at your disposal. Make your own arrangements." "Why, I was thinking that this evening would be a good time, Steerforth, when they're all sitting round the fire. I should like you to see it when it's snug. It's such a curious place. So be it, returned Steerforth. This evening. I shall not give them any notice that we are here, you know, said I, delighted, shaking hands with them. The streets looked small, of course. The streets that we have only seen as children always do, I believe, when we go back to them, but dancing a little child in her arms, while another little fellow clung to her apron. I had no difficulty in recognizing either Minnie or Minnie's children. The glass door of the parlour was not open, but in the workshop across the yard I could faintly hear the old tune playing, as if it had never left off. "Is Mr. Omer at home?" said I, entering. "I should like to see him for a moment if he is." "Oh, yes, sir, he is at home," said Spirit, "but I don't quite remember when. Are you sure it was me?" "Quite. I think my memory has got as short as my breath," said Mr. Omer, looking at me and shaking his head, "for I don't remember you." "Don't you remember your coming to the coach to meet me, and my having breakfast here, and our riding to Blunderstone together, you and I, and Mrs. Joram, and Mr. Joram too, who wasn't her husband then?" "Why, Lord bless my soul!" exclaimed Mr. Omer, after being thrown by his surprise into a fit of coughing. "You don't say so! Minnie, my dear, you recollect?" "Dear me, yes," said my waistcoat with his forefinger. "And there was a little child, too. There was two parties. The little party was laid along with the other party. Over at Blunderstone it was, of course. Dear me, and how have you been since?" "Very well," I thanked him, as I hoped he had been too. "Oh, nothing to grumble at, you know," said Mr. Omer. "I find my breath gets short, but it seldom gets longer. Do name it, sir," says Joram. "Yes, do, father," says Minnie. "And now he's come into the business. And look here, the youngest." Minnie laughed. The measurement of the dancing child upon the counter. "By a good 2 inches. Will you take something?" I thanked him, but declined. "Let me see," said Mr. Omer. "Boxes. Boatman's sister. She had something to do with your family. She was in service there, sure?" My answering in the affirmative gave him great satisfaction. I believe my breath was, "We'll get long next. We've got a young relation of hers here, under articles to us, that has as elegant a taste in the dressmaking business. I assure you, I don't believe there's a duchess in England can touch her." "Not little Emily," said I involuntarily. "This town are mad against her." "Nonsense, father," cried Minnie. "My dear," said Mr. Omer, "I don't say it's the case with you," winking at me. "Station in life, father, and not had given them any hold to talk about her, and then they couldn't have done it. Couldn't have done it, my dear." Any woman couldn't do that she shouldn't do, especially on the subject of another woman's good looks. I really thought it was all over with Mr. Omer after he had uttered this libellous pleasantry. He coughed to that extent, and his breath eluded all his attempts to recover it with that obstinacy that I fully expected to see his head to go down behind the counter, and his little black breeches with the rusty little bunches of ribbons at the knees come quivering up in a last ineffectual struggle. At length, however, he got better, though he still panted hard, and was so exhausted that he was obliged to sit on the stool of the shop desk. "You see," he said, wiping his head and breathing with difficulty, "she hasn't taken much to any companions here. She hasn't taken kindly to any particular acquaintances and friends, not to mention sweethearts. In consequence, an ill-natured story at the school that if she was a lady, she would like to do so-and-so for her uncle, don't you see, and buy him such and such fine things." few moments further rubbing of it. That you may not consider me long-winded as well as short-breathed, I believe that's all about it. As they had spoken in a subdued tone while speaking of Emily, I had no doubt that she was near. On my asking now if that were not so, Mr. Omer nodded yes, and nodded towards the door of the parlour. My hurried inquiry, if I might peep in, was "It does leave off," was beating softly all the while. "Wouldn't you like to step in?" said Mr. Omer, and speak to her. "Walk in and speak to her, sir. Make yourself at home." I was too bashful to do so then. I was afraid of confusing her, and I was no less afraid of confusing myself. But I informed myself of the hour at which she left of an evening, in order that our visit might be timed to cough, and another cry upon my shoulder. At last, to make the matter easier, I went upstairs with her, and, having waited outside for a minute, while she said a word of preparation to Mr. Barkis, presented myself before that invalid. He received me with absolute enthusiasm. He was too rheumatic to be shaken hands with, but he begged me to shake the tassel of the top of his nightcap which I did most cordially. The queerest object I ever beheld. "What name was it as I wrote up in the cart, sir?" said Mr. Barkis, with a slow, "She's the usefulest and best of women, C.P. Barkis." All the praise that anyone can give to C.P. Barkis having been to me, and that she would have received him with the utmost gratitude and devotion in any case. But his easy-spirited humour, his genial manner, his handsome looks, his natural gift of adapting himself to whomsoever he pleased, and making